Hello, everybody. It's Monday with Jesus. I'm Amelia.
Tom here.
And
Hey.
yeah, okay. The story for this week is from the Gospel of John, John 18. Those churches that follow the lectionary, more high liturgical type churches, would be celebrating Christ the King Sunday, the end of the liturgical year. And I think it'll be pretty obvious why this particular passage from John 18 was chosen for Christ the King Sunday. So I'm going to be telling it in church, so I'll tell it for you as well. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, and he summoned Jesus, and he said to him, "Are you the king of the Judeans?" And Jesus answered, "Are you asking this on your own, or did someone tell you about me?" And Pilate said, "Am I a Judean? Your own people and the chief priests handed you over to me. So what have you done?" And Jesus said, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would have been fighting to prevent me from being handed over to you. But as it is, my kingdom is not from this world." So then Pilate said, "So then you are a king." And Jesus answered, "For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." And then Pilate said, "Oh, what is truth?" So that's the story. Well, I guess we might start with, this is a conversation between Pilate and Jesus. And the setting is apparently Pilate's headquarters. And Pilate's coming, it says he came again to the headquarters and he summoned Jesus. So maybe, Tom, you could just tell us a little bit what was going on before this, because Pilate was someplace else and Jesus was someplace else.
Well, Jesus was arrested on the night, and so he was kept in prison until the morning. Then he was taken by the Judean authorities to the Praetorium, which was right on the edge of the wall, probably not where he was held overnight. And so this is the first interrogation of Jesus by Pilate in the Praetorium.
What was the relationship between Jesus and Pilate? And
Well, go ahead.
well, also kind of just for the sake of people who might not know, what was Pilate's role in the scenario here?
Right. Well, Pilate was appointed as procurator of the kingdom of Judea in the aftermath of the deposition of Archelaus, who was the son of Herod the Great, and had proven to be ineffective and alienated the people. So Pilate was appointed then by the emperor to be the Roman authority in Judea. He was of the equestrian class, He was not a senator, but he was given then authority as the representative of the Roman Empire in Judea. And so he was effectively imperial authority.
Why would his first question have been, are you the king of the Jews or Judeans? I think I said.
Well, that apparently was what the chief priests, when they delivered him, was the charge that they made against him, which was that he was seeking to overthrow the Romans and establish his own kingship, that he was claiming to be the king of the Judean thing, that he would take Pilate's place, was the accusation. It was an accusation of treason that was punishable by the Romans with death if that was proven. So it was a serious charge.
Right, and Jesus, in his normal death way, sidesteps the question, doesn't give a direct answer. So he says, you know, why is this your question, or does somebody else tell you about me?
Right.
And then Pilate's response is, am I a Jew, or I'm not a Jew, depending on what your translation is, a Judean. So I guess I understand him to be offended. He's a Roman, and he looks down on the Judean people. But then he goes on to explain that Jesus is own people, and the chief priests had handed him over. So something must be amiss here. And he says, "What have you done?" I guess. What did?
Right.
Yeah.
Why have they charged you?
Right. Why have they?
With this crime? And what is it then that is the truth about who you are and what you claim to be? And so he is taking literally the charge of the chief priests that Jesus is guilty of treason and trying to overthrow the Roman domination, the Roman government in Judea.
So then Jesus has not directly said, yes, I'm a king, but he does imply that, because he starts talking about his kingdom.
Right.
But that his kingdom is not what Pilate and others would think about in terms of kingdom. He says, my kingdom's not from this world. So what is the nature of Jesus's kingdom?
Right. Well, it's not of this world. It is a spiritual kingdom, a kingdom of God that is not then a government or a kingdom that would replace the kingdom of the Romans. Rather, it is a kingdom of God, a kingdom of which Jesus is then the representative. So this is in effect a story of competition between a secular authority and a sacred authority, a kingdom of the military and economic might of Rome, and Jesus' kingdom of spiritual power, of the power of love, of justice, of peace. And so this is a conflict then between these two kingdoms that they are talking about.
It is interesting, if you think about it. I mean, Pilate was the most powerful man in Judea, right?
Right.
He was a Roman governor,
Right.
The representative of Caesar. And Jesus, of course, came from this kind of know-nothing town, Nazareth, up in Galilee, that people weren't all that impressed with Galilee. So he's a very ordinary person, carpenter, hanging out with fishermen. But I hadn't really thought about it. But here he is in the seat of power in his country, in his context, on trial. And so he takes advantage of that, I think, to try to bear witness. But he's trying to, I guess he's defending himself to some extent. I mean, do you hear that with what he's
Oh,
doing?
yes.
Yeah, okay. So the evidence that his kingdom is not from this world is, he says, if my kingdom were from this world, then my followers, of which he has really a lot at this point, he has a large crowd who follows him, they would have fought. But they didn't. So how would have his followers have fought? Would have been at the arrest, or what?
Well, at the arrest, Peter did fight. He struck the slave of the high priest, cut off his ear. Jesus told him to put away his sword. So Jesus was resisting the impulse of military intervention, of a revolution, so that he did not endorse that. His followers did not fight because Jesus commanded them not to. Then the question is, what is the kingdom that Jesus is seeking to establish? And what is it then that he is doing in then accepting arrest and not fighting against the Romans? And in the context of the post-war period, when this story was effectively composed in the aftermath of the Jewish-Roman War, this was a very real question. Is there authority for a kingdom other than a kingdom that is built on military and economic power?
Mhm. So after Jesus talks about his kingdom, not so much what his kingdom is, but what it is not, that it's not from this world, and he gives the evidence for why it's not from this world, he concludes that little portion by saying again, as it is, my kingdom is not from this world. So Pilate's hearing him say kingdom, kingdom, kingdom over again, and so he says, so are you a king? And Jesus, I may have forgotten this, I can't remember, but Jesus responds by saying, you say that I'm a king, which is, again, he's not directly saying I'm the king, and yet he's clearly implying the nature that he is one with great authority.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
So then he says, I think this really powerful thing, he's really giving his purpose, what he was born for, why he came into the world. And what that is, he says, is to testify to the truth, which is a powerful statement, but I'm not quite sure what it means. Is he saying, what is the truth? And that's, of course, that's what Pilate asks, what is truth? But what is Jesus referencing here? Is truth another word for God, or is he talking about himself as, how do you understand that?
Well, the framework of that word in this context has been established by what happened earlier in the story. And so earlier, Jesus does say, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. The truth to which Jesus is bearing witness is the truth about God, that God is not the emperor, that God is not the God of the Romans, the truth about himself, that he is the Son of God, the one whom God has sent to save the world from the powers of evil, so that his authority is then based on a kingdom of love and justice, rather than on military might and on injustice, as was happening with this trial. So Jesus is bearing witness to the truth of God's kingdom, of God's government over the world, and that the Roman authority, the Roman power is not finally a just government. Was established by force, So Jesus is bearing witness to the truth about the way in which the world will be saved from the powers of good and evil, or from the powers of evil.
Right. Well, one of the things I think the story does is really lift up truth as a very, very high value, because Jesus says he came to testify to the truth. And sometimes in these days, it just feels like truth is not a very high value. So I think that's one thing to pay attention to in the story. But then the other one, it does end with this question that Pilate asks, and you have to, I wondered how to ask that. Is Pilate still being cynical and hostile, or is this a real question? Tom, you have come to the conclusion that during the course of the conversation, Pilate has been impressed by Jesus and has been drawn to think. And ask this question as a real question, which I think it leads us to ask the question as well. What is truth? What do we believe? What do we kind of stand our ground on? What would we bet our life on in some ways?
Right. Well, what happens in the course of the trial is that Pilate is increasingly persuaded by Jesus' strength, his telling the truth. And so there is clear structure in the story that Pilate is more and more drawn to Jesus and is sympathetic to him. So I think that this is a real question that Pilate is asking. And it's a question that is central to the whole of the gospel. What is the truth? What is the truth about God? What is the truth about Jesus? What is the truth about the good news of this kingdom that is not of this world, but is a spiritual kingdom that is established and that operates by the power of love, the power of justice, the power of peace? So it is a kingdom that is not the kingdom of this world, but is rather the kingdom that comes from above, the kingdom of love.
I think one of the reasons we might believe also that Pilate did come to listen and to some extent, admire Jesus and maybe have somewhat of a change of heart. There's a lot of similarity between this story and the story of what happened with John the Baptist and King Herod, who also liked to listen to John, and yet in the end was, gave in to the crowd, really, the same way that Pilate will, and executed a man that he knew was innocent, holy, and righteous. And so Pilate will do the same thing.
So he becomes then the source, the way of implementation of a lie, and of injustice, of a great wrong. But it is also a wrong that is energized, that is given force by the chief priests, the scribes, and finally the crowd. And so it's a question then that is asked to every listener, what do you believe about the truth? And are you one of those who will join those who oppose the truth? Or are you willing to give your life to be a disciple of the truth?
Well, that's a pretty profound way to end. Thank you, Tom. Thanks to all of you who've sort of journeyed with us through this year of Mark, with intermittent enjoyment of stories from Gospel of John, as we do now as the year B ends. And we look forward to living into the Gospel of Luke next liturgical year. So blessings, everyone.
Blessings, peace,